So tonight, I have to ask you a huge favor. For all of this to work, I need you to literally set all of your emotions, all of your negative thoughts in regards to certain parts of the Idaho 4 case aside. I need you to open your minds and understand exactly why I did what I did. I poked the bear and I was looking for a certain response. I was looking for an open, truthful response. I played a little game and it didn't disappoint. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm ARHayes. This is aconvictsthoughts, and I want to welcome you back. Thank you for coming on back and giving me a shot to actually explain myself. Not too long ago, January 28th, I put out a video directly pointed at a victim's family, even using the most disrespectful of terms. I flat out, even in my thumbnail, called them a liar. I did this on purpose. I know it can be considered playing games, and maybe that's juvenile. Maybe it's not the right way of dealing with certain things, but I had to get their attention. Let me explain to you why. Now, I got to give Pavarotti, Jay Embry, a shout out. As you know, this man has been diligently working to keep people's minds open and even begin working together to look at all of the inconsistencies and the issues within the Idaho 4 case. Even though him and I have a difference of opinion on a few things here and there, that doesn't mean I don't recognize his hard work, and I also understand what he's trying to accomplish. You see, when I stepped to this platform, one of my ultimate goals was to bring attention to the justice system, the courts, the judges, the attorneys, even all the way down to the nitty-gritty of the investigations that land people either incarcerated or going to trial. I wanted to bring attention to the very fact, as we've watched over the years, it seems as though things are changing more in favor of law enforcement and the prosecution than they are for the defense. And I believe the Idaho 4 case steps up to the plate and showcases all of that. There's so many questions, so much is sealed, but even more so, we all watched with our very own eyes the crime scene mishandled, the investigation and the very techniques utilized mishandled, all the way down to the IgG, the testing, and that even being utilized just as a tip, not even necessary to explain how they got the DNA of Bryan Kohberger off of that DNA from the knife sheath. And the entire process, they just felt as though we, as normal, everyday individuals, didn't deserve to know the truth. But even more so, if you've noticed lately, we've heard nothing about the leak and the investigation that Judge Hippler was supposedly going to put into place to pursue that. We, as even the documents and the photos, which, look, I'm not a big fan of these things being released. I know it's a necessity. I know it's important. I personally, if I had to look at both sides of the coin, I feel for the families of the lost lives because they have to endure it all over again, even though all of these things were hidden from them through the entire process as well. You see, I put out a video, and I knew I would get a response. And I didn't expect it to be a good one. And no, it was not. As a matter of fact, I'll put the very beginning of it up on the screen for you to see. But I, at the end of the day, am considered to be unbelievably repulsive. And I get it. When you attack somebody's integrity and call them a liar, you shouldn't expect the best of the results. And this is why I've asked you to set aside your emotions, set aside the negativity for a moment, because I want you to realize what transpired out of all of this is actually very beneficial, not only to my cause in bringing attention to the very necessary components of our justice system, but it could actually even be beneficial for many of you that feel as though Bryan Kohberger either deserves an appeal or maybe even a second chance to have his case reviewed, because the Goncalves family laid it all out in their recent interview with Brian Entin. Now, I know I watched it. I watched it numerous times. I'm even bringing some of the clips to all of you to utilize them to my benefit. I get it. That's repulsive. I get it. It's repulsive. But look, they stepped up to the plate. On January 30th, I knew this interview with Brian Entin or possibly somebody else was coming because I got a email response from Steve. I knew I would. I knew it was coming. And I was prepared for it because I knew my mindset was driven for that very reason. I wanted a response. Now, I'm not going to give you all the details of what was in the response because he delivered the majority of that in the interview with Brian Entin. He even literally poked back at me in that interview because they were upset I called
There's a plea deal.
And I know.
Has anyone been bothering you guys? I mean, like Kristi was saying before we got on here, you know, this latest document dump has kind of energized some of these like pro-burger people. I mean, are people bugging you guys or do they respect you or?
They like to throw our name out there a lot, and they like to, go back and look at old interviews or whatnot, and call us liars about things and this and that. And the thing is, we never lied about anything. There may have been times during the case that we had been misinformed and we spoke, misinformed information, but contrary to what some people might or might not believe, it really doesn't matter to us. But we never intentionally lied. There's a lot of misinformation out there, so to think that at times that we didn't have misinformation would be, why are we held at this different standard? We were all under this gag order and fighting, and people were reaching out to us on different levels, and we were vetting that stuff. Like, is this true? Is this true? That, this person is this person, this person sounds really credible, like, I think this might really be true. Oh, that is absolutely not true. And we weren't just running with everything, I'm saying, that we were getting. So,
people are very simple-minded in the true crime community.
And I know many across the board have called them that, but I did a direct video just prior to this interview, and I know they were referencing me based upon not only the way that they stated it in that interview, but also based upon the email that I received just before. The interview was actually a good interview. I understood just about everything that they had to say, all the struggles that they were enduring. And one thing I do have to point out, and you have to understand, that had to be painful. They just got Kaylee's personal items back from the crime scene, and we're going through those. And I can only imagine the pain of going through the personal items to find little sticky notes and little things that make you remember your lost loved one, your daughter. So look, I've asked you nicely. We're setting aside the negativity, and we're going to talk about the very importance that I find out of this interview. And I'm so glad that they did it. And I'm glad that I poked the bear. And I'm glad I pissed him off, because it actually brings the very things that I want brought to the forefront, the attention that I want put on things to be brought out. And look, I know others are trying to accomplish the very same thing. And that's a great thing about the community. We all have our different ways and techniques of doing it. Just because I give praise to Jay Embry doesn't mean that I don't also offer that same praise to Harsh Reality, True Crime with Dago, Devil's Advocates, Pete, Lucky. There's so many out there that are working so hard to bring the very eyes to this case, because it's important that they all deserve credit, all of them across the board. And I'm just glad to be a part of the community with the ability to take it my way to deliver what I want to, not only to you, but possibly to others that have to endure investigations and the justice system. You see, in their interviews, they break down the very things that are necessary to be brought forth to show the very issues in Moscow, Idaho, with Bill Thompson.
I want people to understand when we say that these victims fought harder than Thompson defended them, I want them to read those docs, read all of them, and say, did these victims fight harder than this prosecutor fought to defend them? And I think it's pretty clear. I think even with what happened to Xana and our daughter, it was clear these guys fought, and Thompson was a weak, pathetic man. And he ran. So he has to own it. It was just a pathetic prosecution. So we're learning things through other, there's other laws that have to come into effect. And we've learned that he defined these things. He purposely, it was a strategy not to say that was sexually motivated, even though he was doing murder porn on his phone and they found that. And it was also purposely that he said it wasn't stalking, because that would have tied their hands. That would have tied the community's hands, where they would have had to publish that every 23 times he was out there and about, he was stalking. They would have had to put that on a webpage. They would have been obligated. That community, the universities, every stalking event that would have happened in Moscow would have been recorded. So he purposely decided, I'm not even going to pursue stalking, because that is going to hurt the university more than if I just say, we're not even going to we're not going to go down that road. We don't need to, because I got the DNA in the crime scene. He didn't need to. So he backed off of that stuff. But that doesn't mean
the lead prosecutor. And can you imagine how many cases that he possibly has done these very things in outside of the Bryan Kohberger case? Think of all the plea bargains this man has worked. And don't forget, his name is directly stamped on the Stickergate case as well. This man is a liar. He is a cheat. And Kristi Goncalves brought it straight out about how deceiving and conniving they legitimately were. He makes a very good point, Steve does, that it looks as though the weak Bill Thompson prosecution literally had stepped out on this very case and just accepted a plea because he didn't want to show up for work anymore. Well, even more so, I think Steve, in the back of his mind, even though he may not want to admit it to all of us, I think he's worried, because he does state that he's worried that Bill Thompson's actions could come back to bite this case in the hiney. Was a Frank's hearing literally very much necessary in this case? Was there prosecutorial misconduct that was covered up by this plea bargain? Oh, I think absolutely. And even more so, I think the entire reason, and Steve really points at this because he is very knowledgeable, it seems, he makes it very clear that he knows where the leak is coming from and why that special investigative person by Judge Hippler was put into place. And all of a sudden, even Steve steps up to the plate to call it all fake.
I don't know what's in it.
We've been trying to find out about the leak investigation that we don't feel like it's even happening. We think it's fake because we were the first, my lawyer was the first one to point out that there was a leak in this investigation before it ever even got to Dateline. And we've never even been contacted. He's never been contacted. So to us, there is no investigation going on whatsoever. So we emailed them directly, and they basically just told us, leave, get out of here. We're not going to tell you anything. We're not going to tell you the truth. You don't need to know the truth. We're going to do our investigation, and maybe you'll know what happened. And I said, you know what? you can say that, but I'll go to the media and I'll let people understand that that's the kind of leadership that we have in this case right now. We have very questionable leadership who's literally sitting here telling us that we don't have the right to know about the investigation that cost us a trial.
I mean, yeah, in hindsight, we think did the leak sabotage our case? Because, weeks later we had a plea deal like thrown in our lap, and 3 days later we were sitting down in Boise, giving this guy a plea deal. So
could you imagine that? All of us out here, the public, the taxpayers, those that have our eyes very strongly on what's happening, all waiting patiently for the answers to the leak, because that could potentially, and I think Kristi said it very well, that derailed the trial. That cost the victims' families and everybody across the board a trial, but maybe even more so, it might have sabotaged the chances of Bryan Kohberger getting a fair trial. Could that be the whole reason why Bryan Kohberger accepted the plea? Remember, many feel as though there was a threat that had to have been made to Bryan Kohberger or his family to get him to plea to get that death penalty off the table. But do you think it's possible that the Goncalves family know legitimately? Had they been pursuing that because they know the prosecution and the very people within the case from very early on were leaking information? And they even make the statement, how would we have known about this if we hadn't got it from this? Guys, they're given the points that help all of your arguments. And I get it. Set aside the negativity. I know you don't like what you see when it comes to the various comments they make, the various discussions that they do, the GoFundMes. None of that is really what we need to be focused on. If you want real and true justice, you have to set aside the emotional chaos that you feel in a negative manner and focus on the positives that could help the cause in bettering the end result. Do you realize Steve Goncalves and Kristi, in a very key interview, Brian Entin gets a lot of views, ladies and gentlemen. He's watched by far more than me. If you combine many of your favorite YouTubers all together, Brian Entin gets more views than all of us combined. And they stepped up to the very plate on there, frustrated, pissed off, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but I got to say, I think I egged him into a little bit of frustration by distinctly calling the alpha a liar. But at the end of the day, he stepped up to the plate, and he clearly states, even tearing apart Hitler, Judge Hitler.
Yes, he said they were going to assign us, and he was going to come after that person, whoever did it, with vigor.
And Hitler has been a huge disappointment. I mean, he has been a massive disappointment. And we've been saying all we want to know is where it's at, because we're not being contacted, and we know who your leaks are. We've heard some of them. We were aware of some of these facts before they became public, so we could probably clear some of the stuff up, and they don't even want to talk to us because they're scared of what we've discovered and who would get fired if we actually put that on record. And they tell us, stop emailing us because you're making records.
Do they just want this all to end? Is that they just want to have this in the rearview mirror? I mean,
I don't know.
Yeah, they keep telling us, stop emailing us, you're making records. They literally told our lawyer.
What do they mean by that? Why can't there be records?
I don't know.
Well, if you raise these things up in court like we did, we raised this up and said, hey, there's a leak from the prosecutor. They're like, you're making records. Stop doing it. And I'm like, listen, you got to understand the people you're dealing with. I'm not going to be okay with these side deals that are going on. I don't know what's going on, but all I know is I'm getting to the truth. 100%. We're going to get to the truth. I don't care who gets in trouble. And that hasn't made it a very popular narrative. So now they're just like, stop emailing us, stop making records, just leave us alone. This is inappropriate.
They said they can't deny or confirm whether there's an investigation going on or not. We're not privy to that information.
Sure. You got to watch it. He tears him up and says he's just as much of a problem in this as anybody else. But he clearly tells you, if you open up your mind to what he's saying and get past the negativity. He clearly tells you there's prosecutorial misconduct. There's issues within this case, and that's why Bill Thompson rushed into this plea bargain. And I guarantee you at the end of the day, yes, Steve Goncalves wants the end result of justice for his daughter. And he wants it to be Kohberger. He's very direct in stating he believes it's Kohberger, and he believes that he knows why it's Kohberger. And more power to him. His opinion is his opinion. My opinion is my opinion. And all of your opinions are your opinions. And I'm not going to put you down for having that opinion. But we do have to feel as though he actually helped the cause in bringing attention to the downfalls of this very case. And could that potentially be brought more into the light as time moves forward? He even mentioned, which I think many of us already knew, that Ann Taylor was still on the case because she has to stay on it, signing off on the documents that are going to become unsealed and released. So, of course, until everything's out and about and all the signatures are in place, Ann Taylor's going to be on the team. And I've already told you, I'm not a fan of Ann Taylor. You're not going to get me to change my mind. I just stand where I stand. But even Steve Goncalves now, on top of the many others that you see, and this is where Jay Embry, where I've got to agree with the old Pogmeister over there, he clearly stated, let's not attack the very people that start bringing up issues in this case. We got Howard Bloom. Why would I attack Howard Bloom when he's now raising the very points in discussions that we've been screaming for a long time? We feel like this was a multi-perp crime. I don't care if Howard Bloom wants to go out there and write another book and make more money on that. I just want him to continue to speak on a large platform that a single perp, a Bryan Kohberger only perp, in this case doesn't make sense and it doesn't add up. Do you agree with me? It's important to get our eyes and our minds on the same page and open them. We need to be more open to hearing different angles. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to step up before you to tell you who did it, why they did it, when they did it. I'm just telling you my thought process is very simple. It's a multi-perp crime. I don't believe the white car that came into the parking behind the house and into view of the camera, I don't even believe that car had anything to do with the crime. To be honest with you, I don't even think the actual perps that committed this crime left in a car until later. And if they did, it wasn't one that was caught on camera right around the house, and it hasn't been found with the victim's DNA and blood in it. I think the investigation was shady. I think the routes that they took to get to Bryan Kohberger were shady, but even more so, I think Bill Thompson, we need to look into his entire career and how many cases he put his DNA onto that potentially just are corrupt and ended up in plea bargains just the same as Bryan Kohberger's for the same reasons. When I emailed Steve back, I asked a very simple question. I have not gotten a response, but I'll let you know what my very simple question was. Do you feel in your heart that Bill Thompson, if he had taken this to trial, could have proven Bryan Kohberger is the guilty perp of this crime? It's a plain, simple question. There's no hurrah within that. There's no fluff and duff. It's a very straightforward, this is what it is. I just want to know, do you think Bill Thompson could have gotten a guilty verdict in this case? And I believe he answered in the Brian Entin interview. He clearly stated Bill Thompson's weak. Bill Thompson would not have won this case. And now you also have to realize he makes the very accusations against Hippler's court, against the court clerk and others in that court, that Steve Goncalves needs to stop pushing the issue and leaving the breadcrumbs for all of us to see. He tells all of us, that he is being instructed to leave nothing more on record, because I'm telling you, Idaho wants this to disappear. They want this gone. I appreciate you actually opening your mind and listening to me, because this isn't a rant. This is not a rave. This is not me pointing the fingers in a negative manner towards anybody. Legitimately, this is a good step in the right direction, ladies and gentlemen. And in my opinion, even if you don't support the person themselves, if you don't support many of the things that they do, realize they're bringing attention to this case and the very negativity on the prosecutorial side and the judge side. That benefits all of us, as it brings even more light onto the issues within our justice system. And that, ladies and gentlemen, has been my very want from the moment I stepped onto the YouTube platform. But even more so, we all, like others have said, may not work directly with each other. We may not be hand in hand in theories or thoughts or mindsets. But that doesn't mean we have to chop each other down either. Support the cause. Support the betterment of the open-mindedness and the views into these cases, so that we can get to the bottom line, the truth. I appreciate each and every single one of you. I know this was a tough one to swallow, but you know me. I always bring it to you, and I try to bring it to you in the best way, the most honest way I can. Have a great night. I'll see you again soon. ARHayes, Convicts Thoughts. Hit that like button or give me that middle finger, whichever one best suits your feelings about what I brought to you tonight. Have a good one.